Hi, everybody. It's Dennis with TSANet. Thank you so much for joining us here today on this TSANet Connect Administrator Training. We've got a lot of ground to cover here. This is really falls into Paul's wheelhouse, and so I'm going to turn it over to him, and he's going to run through the slides. There may be a few where I chime in here. Stephanie Benson is with us as well. We're going to make sure that everybody that is signed up for this webinar is going to get a copy of these slides. And with that, Paul, I'm just going to turn it over to you.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Dennis. So let me get started here right away. I want to just provide a bit of background about TSANet Connect for those that were not able to attend the previous webinar and maybe are not familiar with it. It is our next generation collaboration portal. It takes kind of the best of what we've learned over the past 20-some years of the member web, as well as the last 5 or 6 years with Case Exchange, and kind of brings those two things together and now what we call TSANet Connect. I've got another slide here that basically walks through how it works. The way to kind of look at this is we've got a member that wants to initiate a request and then a member that's going to receive the request. And it's really as simple as the member logging into the member web, or not the member web, TSANet Connect, finding the member company they want to collaborate with, filling out the form. This is one of the key differences now between the previous member web and TSANet Connect, is it's all form-based. You basically fill out this form, press submit, and at this point, emails start to flow, and this is the default behavior. You can also integrate your systems. We'll talk about that in a bit, but as a default, it just works with email. So the sender gets an email, the receiver gets an email, the receiver responds to the email. You can see the button there. That brings them to a very simple form where they share 4 pieces of information: their case number, who the assigned engineer is, and basically how to contact them. You can also include, next steps, things like that. But essentially, that's where we step out. At this point, both endpoints are connected. Both endpoints are aware of who the assigned engineer is on each side. Both sides are familiar with contact information. They can then work the case outside of the TSANet Connect system. That could be via email. That could be via phone calls. That also could be a secure team site, such as Slack or Microsoft Teams or WebEx Teams. There's a lot of these secure team sites out there as well. But essentially, we are focused on initiating the collaboration and then letting the 2 members work directly without going through a middle system. Now, we do have some checkpoints along the way here where we make sure the receiving member is responding in time. If not, we kick off an escalation process. And then also at some point during this workday case, we will send a feedback message to the other side to basically kind of see how things are going. And one thing you'll see in all of these emails is the embedded escalation instructions. So it is designed to make sure that the engineer only has to come to TSANet one time to submit his request. And from that point forward, everything he needs, as well as escalation instructions if something goes wrong, is contained either in the emails or inside of the CRM system if you choose integration. So that in a nutshell is how TSANet Connect works. If you look at the webinars that we're doing here, we had a previous webinar that you can find at this URL that I have listed here. This provides an overview of TSANet Connect in much more in-depth than what I just did here in 2 minutes. So if you want to learn a lot more about what TSANet Connect is, exactly how it works, encourage you to look at that webinar recording. We have this one today, which of course we'll record and put that up on the web as well. And then we have a third one that's planned on February 26th that will go into details around partner programs. So I'm going to not spend a lot of time on that today, because on February 26th, we'll get into a lot more detail as far as partner programs and how those are managed in TSANet Connect. So that's the webinar series. Then moving into the administrator roles. And I'm only going to focus here on the one that has really changed with TSANet Connect. The business manager role, That's consistent with what the business manager role has always been. Program managers, that's consistent with what the program manager role has always been. The new role here, the modified role, is now the escalation manager. And this is, it used to be what we called a key user. So I think the example, it's usually a support manager, somebody that's inside of the operations. But now they actually have a role as part of that collaboration request. And specifically, and you'll see this when I talk about your inbound process, they're part of managing the escalation process. So even if you have some text that describes, you know, how do you escalate an issue, and it could be a duty manager, et cetera, we still want an actual person, an actual email, and this person is going to be made aware if, for example, you don't respond that initial response within a certain period of time, or if the other side has some type of complaint, basically gives us access to a person as well. So that escalation manager, and of course you could have more than one of them. If you have multiple departments, multiple different processes there, you could have more than one escalation manager, but they do now play an active role in the operations. So that's the key change as far as roles and responsibilities. So then moving into the actual admin interface, it is a very flat-based, you know, kind of task-based design. We do have integrated help in here, so it's all been really simplified. And the other big change is you will see all of the settings. Before it used to be you would only see the settings that you could change, and then there was other settings that we on the TSANet admin side could change for you. Now you will see everything, but things that you can't change, you'll see a contact TSANet to modify. And I'll show you some examples of that. But this navigation's underneath this hamburger menu, as they call it. And I'm going to cover all these parts here with the exception of the partner group. So moving in first into the company, you can see here, I'm not going to go through the different fields here, but essentially this is all the things that make up your account within TSANet Connect. So all the basic things. What's your membership level? Some text that are showing up on your login page of the public website. But probably the most important piece here is the departments. But the other thing I want to kind of call out here is this is an area where we say, hey, you can't make changes. So we do not let you create and delete departments. And I'll explain why here in a bit. But here's an example where if you can't make the changes, we show you everything. And then you just basically press the Contact TSANet button. That sends you through a workflow. We'll get in touch with you and make those types of changes. And here's an example where we show the integrated helps. Whenever you see this next to an area, if you click on this, it'll give you more details about exactly what that is and how it works. So in general, you'll kind of see these buttons and integrated help throughout the navigation. But as I said, the most important part for that company setup is your departments. This, as well as kind of the trend you're going to see with TSANet Connect in general, is simplify. So we've really simplified the departments and how everything works. The way to think about departments is this is setting up your organization to how it will be viewed when other members contact you. So it's not let's expose the complexities of our internal organization. It's let's create the most simple viewpoint of our organization for other members. So how this plays out is in the search results for TSANet Connect, it will return company, department, and then there's a department description. So a couple great examples here of when you may want to use a department is, for example, in a custom group. So here's an example with a solution support group called FlexPod, and you can see here how that shows up. And then again, there can be some descriptions here. Another great example is if you do have a large organization, there's different product groups, maybe even other subnames of companies and areas. You can specify that here. So here's an example with IBM, and we've got a business analytics group, and then in the description highlighting the different products that would be found underneath that. So as we talked before, you are not able to, on your own, create departments. You work with TSANet staff for that. The main thing I'm going to highlight here is our goal as we work with you is to make sure we're really creating a simple view of your organization. So only creating departments is needed, but there are some specific use cases where you would want to create departments. So we would work very closely with you to make sure that that was done correctly. Okay, so that's departments. Then if we move into users, I won't spend a lot of time here. The user piece is very straightforward. You can add users here. You can also make changes to users. You can disable or delete users. So as an admin, you have full control over your users. But what we've really designed TSANet Connect for is to make sure that this whole user management is not a burden on the administrators. So when you get migrated over to TSANet Connect, we will give you two options for a login page. So every member is going to get their own unique login page. So it'll be a specific URL you point your users at. And the first method, or the first login page option, is this authentication mail method. And this really requires then that the administrator doesn't have to create any users and doesn't have to manage users, with the exception of administrators, obviously. So any type of caller can just come here, put their email address. They'll get an authentication email with a URL in there that will work for them for 30 days. And they can do that as many times as they want. So that just kind of self-manages all of your callers. If you want more control, though, over your callers, you can choose the individual login page option. And what this provides then is a method for a caller to request an account. So you'll see here over to the right-hand side, the person fills out their information, makes the request. That will flow through some workflow, and you just be able to then approve the account, and that would then give them access. So these two methods are really designed to make it very easy to manage your callers, which in a lot of companies, they're hundreds or thousands of users. So based on your requirements, you can pick one of these two methods.
Hey, Paul, just real quickly, because I know there will be some people on the call here. Could you address real quickly about the existing users that are already in the system now?
Yes. So when we migrate you, part of the migration process will be to sit down with you, and we'll take a little bit of time to see if it's necessary to clean up users, but users that are existing in the system that should still be in the system, we will migrate them over. So your login password will still work. The other very common question in this is if you're using group logins, what happens? Well, we intend to basically redirect those group logins to one of these login pages. So the migration thing won't be, oh, now everything that I had doesn't work. We got to re-register. What happens to my group logins? We plan to do it such that the transition over to the site will be fairly seamless for your users. Okay. So then probably the biggest area here is the inbound process. And as you saw before when I gave kind of the introduction, what is TSANet Connect? And you saw that it's a very form-based approach now. Still similar to the previous site, you can have more than one inbound process. We do feel, though, now that it's a form-based method, and the form obviously can be smart and do some interesting things. We do not see people creating a lot of different process documents. So, it can capture things such as product lines, stuff like that people were creating unique inbound processes for in the past. So, yes, you can create more than one inbound process, but we do not see situations where members are going to have, a dozen inbound processes. It should be much fewer. With the inbound process, there are some things that you can modify by yourself, and then there's things that you must contact us for. The things that you can modify, the high-level process details. So this, again, is with the default emails, so you can define where these emails go. Are people CC'd on these emails? What are your support hours? What products are you supported? So kind of the basic things that show up on your inbound process. And then the other thing that you're able to modify is the escalation section. And just like before, there is an escalation instructions, but then there are also the escalation contacts, and it is required that you have an escalation contact. It's optional to have an alternate, but these are used if certain events do not happen, then we alert the escalation contact. So for example, if a member sends you a collaboration request and you do not respond, then within a certain period of time, we will contact that escalation contact. So there's certain parts where that is actually used now as part of the operational process. And then the things that you are not able to modify would be on the lower half of the form. So you need to contact us if you want to change which departments it applies towards or which partner groups it applies towards. And again, we'll talk a lot more about partner groups on the next webinar. But then the other thing you need to contact us for is to modify any fields. So if you want to add some fields or do anything related to kind of the structure of the form, you would work with us on that. And we really see kind of two things in this area that you would contact us to work on. The first is pretty straightforward. You know, you want to add an additional field, and maybe you want to add an additional field in the problem information area. So maybe you want a product line pull down. Then the second use case is maybe you want to add a unique field in the common contact area. So maybe you want to make the customer's case number with you a required field, or maybe you want to add some type of a customer ID or unique identifier. So if there's something very specific about your inbound process with customer entitlement, that could be in that section as well. But again, we would be working very carefully and closely with you to implement that and make whatever modifications we need to do to that as well. Okay, so that's custom fields. And then the second area that you would work with us is if you want to integrate your systems. As we talked before, out of the box, it's going to work with email. That's probably going to work for most members. The volume isn't very large here, and a lot of members can actually take that email process and integrate to their systems as well. A lot of systems have email to case, those types of things. But if you want something more comprehensive, we do see kind of two different integrations that we'll be doing. Again, we'll be probably having a special webinar that talks in more detail to this, but we see two different types of integration. The first is integrating to the ticketing system that you may have. So example, Salesforce, and it's not just Salesforce, it can be any type of system. We do plan to have a bit different approach here than we had in the past, which is these wouldn't be full applications or things that you would download out of the App Exchange or what have you. They would basically be configurations, right? So how do we make it easy for the user to create an outbound request, and how do we make it easy for inbound requests to automatically come into your ticketing system? So those are kind of two areas of integration, largely leveraging the capabilities of the system that you have. So for example, Salesforce has a web to case. We would just leverage that functionality. So fairly lightweight integration approach. And then the second is collaboration systems. And again, this could be something that you want to, for example, open a Slack channel on an outbound collaboration or on an inbound. So that I think is probably a little bit more specific to the use case that you have. We see this more in the solution support space where you have kind of a pre-agreement with a smaller group of members to work a certain way. Then you can kind of define that method of working in there. Or if you plan to use it in an open group, we're going to obviously need to have this rules of engagement. And just like the rest of the process, it's always up to the receiving member to define how they want to collaborate. So that'll be very clear when we do the integration of any type of system like that. But feel free to reach out to me with any kind of specific questions here, but expect as we go into probably the March timeframe, you'll see more details around these integrations. And then the last area, as far as the process document goes, process form, is just like in the previous system, you do have the ability to add internal notes. And internal notes are really notes that you put on other members' process documents that are for your user's eyes only. So these are notes that are then private to you, only your users see them. And you can see where they're going to show up on the new forms, kind of at the top here. So this could be, for example, you have a very specific internal process that's used to contact a certain member. You can add those specifics there as well. So maybe there's a special product manager that needs to be notified whenever you collaborate with member X. Maybe there's another system that you need to go to record something internally. So this is where you can add those notes and information on other members' process forms. Okay, and then the last piece of the navigation, again, I skipped over partner groups, but you'll get a lot of information on that here in the near future. But for reports, again, we took a very simplistic view here. So in the caller interface, callers will be able to see all the history that they've done, so they'll be able to see their cases that they've created. But then from the admin interface, you'll be able to see everything, and we'll show certain pieces of information in the list below. But we see probably the more common use case is members will download the details in Excel, and this will show everything we know about that collaboration. So not just these fields here. That will allow you then to either run reports and charts and such in Excel, or maybe you would bring those into a reporting environment and match it up with your case data, so you can get things like average resolve time for your internal cases that required collaboration. And then, of course, you would be able to do, response time for partners and things like that. So we do see, this gives you a lot more flexibility with reporting. Again, I suspect this over time, we'll have a special webinar on this with maybe some use cases. And as we learn more about what members want, maybe we would come out with some templates and such in Excel that allow you to answer certain questions very easily. But we see this approach, and we've kind of heard from the members and the technology committee that this, is a much better approach on the reporting side. Provide all the data we have, and then allow members to run the reports that they feel they need. Okay, so then moving into when the migration is going to take place and who gets migrated. So we see for this first half, really kind of 3 different phases. And to give you a sense, we do see migration taking place throughout the entire year. So we have plans to migrate 60% of members by the end of the first half, and then the remaining members in the second half. But this gives you a sense of kind of our approach on how we plan to reach out to members. And I think the most important piece of this slide is to know that we will contact you. We'll reach out to you proactively, so you don't have to envision where you're going to be on here. You have some control over that as well. But phase 1, we have already reached out to those members. There are 5 member companies that we want to have part of this, we'll call it the very first phase. Generally speaking, they've been part of the technology committee, but we will also start to open it up for testing and demos, and all of the regional focus groups. We have sections on that where we are going to do some hands-on demos, give people logins, that type of thing. So it is available for that as well. So if you don't have the ability to make it to one of the focus groups and you do want to get some hands-on, again, that would be another reason to reach out to me as well. But then as we go into phase 2, we do plan to add more members. Again, it's not huge quantities. So in the month of March, it'll probably be another maybe dozen members to give you a sense. And we are going to focus on members that are using Salesforce and members that want to use the standard email process. So really kind of focusing on those type of members. And then when we get to April, it really opens up to more volume migration. So at this point, we'd start to look at other systems as far as integration, and we start to really reach out to all the premium members, basic members. We start bringing on limited members as well, and that's a large portion of our of our membership. And we also feel at that point, any new member that joins would be coming on to the new system as well. So this gives you a sense. So I would say pretty much everyone on this call should expect that we would contact you sometime here in the first quarter of this year. Worst case, it'd be in the month of April. Okay, and last slide here, just to give you a sense of what would happen during the migration. And probably, the thing I would highlight on this is we wouldn't, send you, here's your list of things that you have to do. This is a very kind of collaborative thing. These are the topics, though, that we would go over. We would plan to have some recommendations in each of these areas. So based on what we know about you, here's what we think your login page strategy should be. Here's what we think your department should be modified towards. If we see some old custom groups or things that maybe need to be updated, we would make recommendations for that. And then most importantly, spending time on your inbound process. So is it fine to just take the standard email? Or do you need some custom fields, or you want to do some system integration? Probably most of the time we spent in that area. And then there would be some time for testing and user training. So one of the things that I've stressed in this is it's really a great opportunity to reach back out to your user base, re-message TSANet, get the usage up. It's definitely a good opportunity to kind of restart or refresh TSANet within your organization as well. So we're hoping people really take advantage of that. And that is the last slide that I have.
That's excellent, Paul. It covered a lot of details. Again, I want to emphasize that we're going to be sending out the slide deck, as well as we'll get the link to this webinar, because that was a lot of information. I guess, and I do have the question window is open if anybody has anything. We'll try to hang on here for a couple more minutes. I know we're running up against the bottom of the hour. Paul, let me ask you this: do you want to address anything proactively? I know you talked about, the migration path and all that. Anything that you would recommend to the users now that as far as proactively, they could go in now and kind of take a look at how it's set up and how it will then transform into TSANet Connect? Is probably the best thing to do at this stage. Just kind of take a look at what you got now, right?
Yeah, I think so. I take a look at what you got now. Again, if you weren't able to attend the previous webinar, I would definitely take a look at that. But then if you've kind of looked at that and you sat through this webinar and you really want to get your hands on it, again, contact me and we'll start to work on getting people access into the demo system as well. We plan on, if you plan on attending the North America focus group on February 6th, that's one thing we plan to do, is actually give people logins and do some testing, have some kind of walk along demos. So it may be at the point where you really want to get more detail and, actually getting a login and viewing it might be your next step. I would say the other thing I would really start to look at is, where does this fit in with the other things that's happening in your organization internally, right? So obviously you're going to be doing some training with your end users. It's kind of a little mini, system launch. Again, certainly not as complicated as probably other system changes that you have, but you want to kind of coordinate this in with those things internally as well. So I would start to look into what's the best time frame for that.
And in the last minute here, could you go ahead and plug the regional focus groups, because this is going to be an emphasis on those groups as well.
Yeah, I agree. So, and I would say, we've had great response in the regional focus groups. We have an upcoming one here in Fort Lauderdale on February 6th. Again, there's a remote attend option for that one. So if you can't physically make it there, then there's a ability to attend that one remote. So if you didn't get an invitation to that and you want to do that, again, send me an email. We'll get you on that. But then we also have regional focus groups in Europe, in India, and Australia. And I plan to physically be in both the Europe and India one in March. So again, if you have some members that are in those regions and you want them to get a lot more hands-on and information related to this, that's a great opportunity as well. So again, you can reach out to me on those. We've got Reiner heading up the Europe one, but then again, I'm physically going to be going to that one in India, so I can help get you plugged into those as well.
Okay, excellent. Paul, a lot of good information. Again, we will get these slides, and we'll also, the link to this webinar will be posted up on the website. Any questions can go to paul@tsanet.org. You can also send them to me, dennis@tsanet.org. We're more than happy to answer any of those questions. Thanks a lot, Paul. Great information.
Great. Thanks a lot, Dennis.
Thanks, everybody.